much for joining us. Okay. Yes, thank you. Okay. So tonight we're going to have Paul Crosby here present his presentation called Bamboozled, Are Your Requirements Psyched Out? So we're very excited to hear more about this. Just a quick view from our agenda. Just a quick welcome, a couple of updates, and then we'll hand it over to Paul for his presentation, and then we'll have a quick Q&A at the end. Everybody is muted, but please, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. And when we get to the end of the presentation, we'll bring them out and we'll go from there. Okay. So first announcement, we are looking for some more board members. So this is a fantastic opportunity for anybody who's looking for a new challenge. If you're passionate about business analysis, which I think most of us are, please reach out. So there's lots of advantages for being a board member. You can help us build this chapter. You can earn CDUs, which are sometimes difficult to come by. This is a great way to get those. Help promote the BA profession, meet fellow volunteers, do some networking. And the contribution is typically around 5 to 15 hours a month. So if you are interested, you can reach out to Ebenezer, and his email address is up here. And just to note that IIBA membership and NB chapter membership are required for that position. And just the upcoming events. So next month for our speaker series, we have Tolulu Samuel ready to go, and he's going to be talking about gearing up for disruptive technologies. We did send out, well, there's a couple of surveys that folks might have received from us. One was from myself, and it was just asking about people that might be interested in study groups and those kinds of things. And we got some responses, which is great. And also we were asking about if people were interested in doing some networking. And the most response was from folks that are in Moncton. So stay tuned, and we'll be putting out a date and a place where we can just get together, those that are interested in meeting for a meal or a drink or whatever that might be. So stay tuned. That'll be coming soon. Okay. Yes. So Paul's got quite the bio here, and I won't read all of it because my gosh, you've got a lot of experience and a lot of background, some great knowledge to share with us. So we're really looking forward to it. Paul is the founder and CEO of the Uncommon League, which is an IIBA EEP. And you're offering award-winning virtual business analysis courses, also an author. A couple of books here, Fail Fast, Fail Safe, Harnessing Failure to Succeed, and the Uncommon Book of Analysis Techniques. And I understand you've got a couple more books coming out this year.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So as you mentioned, you've been at PMBA, BA World, Project Summit. I'm sure the list could probably go on and on. A background in manufacturing, insurance, healthcare, education, and government sectors. So quite a varied background work-wise, and covering many roles as well. CFO, portfolio manager, program manager, project manager, educator, editor, business analyst, of course, process improvement, green belt, I believe, and an instructor as well.
Yeah.
And this last bullet point here sounds really interesting. And maybe if you have some time at the end of the hour, you can fill us in a little bit on that. So you're a board member of the Sing Your Life Uncommon Foundation. So it seems like this is helping people skill up, I guess, to learn about IT professions such as business analysis and project management. So that sounds like a great opportunity for folks and a wonderful thing to do. So welcome, Paul, and thank you for being here.
No worries.
Oh, we're not going to questions yet. So I will stop sharing and you can take it away. I will try and stop sharing.
Okay.
There
I
we
can try
go.
sharing. There we go. Okay. I'll share my screen. There we go. Can you see my screen okay?
Not yet. Oh, somebody can.
Yeah, I can see the screen.
Okay.
All right, awesome. Well, welcome everybody. You know, we got a great topic today. We're gonna talk about bamboozled. Are your requirements psyched out? We're gonna take a little bit of a dive into psychology. We're gonna get a little time on the couch, if you will. But we got some great stuff going on today. We got some analytical bias, and we're going to talk about some of those. This is just a little bit of a primer, right? We got our presentation here. There are actually several hundred biases out there that we are yes, that's a lot really to try and go through in 1 hour, but we'll hit a few of the big guns, if you will, for this hour, and we'll kind of reflect on those a little bit, and we'll talk about some of the pros and cons about this. What I want you to do for this presentation is to walk away with, look, understand what the bias is. I want you to understand the good of it. I mean, the biases can be good; they don't have to be all bad, and how you could use that bias in a positive way. And then also we'll look at some of the bad stuff, yucky stuff. We don't want that to happen, kind of thing. So we're going to take a look at those two pieces of it for each of these. We got a lot of good stuff here, and we're going to talk about trying to avoid these biases and how we can kind of work with them, and we'll just kind of explain how to recognize them. It can be a bit tricky. We as lovely human beings are very complex organisms in the way that we think, and we can actually have multiple biases going on at the same time, which kind of is like, oh my gosh, we've got several things going on there. And it makes it a little bit tough to try and figure out what those requirements are, to kind of uncover what the stakeholder needs are, and to get that most effective user experience that we can by having those conversations. So this is a presentation to kind of wet the whistle a little bit. So let's just jump right in here with anchoring. That is the first bias that we'll talk about. We become over-reliant on the first piece of information that we hear. This is a really interesting bias, and I myself am totally guilty of this. Is you're having a conversation with your manager and they give you the parameters for the project, and you just kind of rock and roll with it, right? You just keep okay, fine, that's the scope, I'll stick with the scope, I'm not going to question, I'm not going to look at context, I'm not going to do anything about it. And what happens there is that because we're not looking at things more globally or holistically, we start to get a little horse blinders on, right? We start to get a little bit blind to what is going on in the more of the global context. So this is just a bias that you have to be a little bit aware of, and you can see it in other people too. They keep referring back to this one situation, this one statement, this one thing that has kind of anchored them over the whole course of it. And basically what this is all about is it's a bias in it's perfectly normal. This, for heaven's sakes, if you have this bias, don't feel like you're a horrible person or anything. This is 100% natural for us human beings to have. And it's an anchoring bias, and that we become over-reliant on the first piece of information that we get. The first thing that comes to us, it's like splat right in front of our face. That's the thing that we kind of work with a lot. Well, think about this in terms of when you're negotiating for that salary at your new job. And this is over and over again, the experts have said, hey, I'll negotiate, what's your range? And not really committing to a range in the conversation. Because whoever first makes the first offer, that establishes the parameters, right? It establishes the anchor. So if you are going into a salary negotiation, don't put the anchor down, keep the anchor up, and allow them to set that anchor, and then you can negotiate from that perspective as well. So you heard a single fact, and then all of the decisions that you made from that single fact going forward, right? So it becomes this chain. It becomes very unbreakable chain. And it doesn't matter whether or not the fact or the anchor that has been dropped is right or wrong. Doesn't matter. Everything is just simply based on that. So like in my example, when I talked about being assigned a project, I talked about the fact that I didn't really go beyond that. I didn't look at more than the context of it, because it was like, there's the anchor. And then I started to chain everything based upon that anchor. All my requirements, stakeholder analysis, all my requirement solicitation, my workshops, all of that, the design and everything else was all based on that anchor that got dropped. And I didn't look at that anchor. Look at the anchor and go, oh, wait a minute, is this the right anchor that we should be looking at? Is this the right thing? Am I in the right context? Do I really understand what's going forward? Another thing about the anchoring bias is that you never question that anchor. You keep going on and you don't really look at it. Most people don't change their anchor because all of the decisions are chained together, right? So if you chain everything together to that anchor, undoing that anchor becomes very, very difficult. Becomes really hard the longer that anchor is out there and people are chaining to it. So one of the good things to do in analysis is to, as soon as that anchor gets dropped, verify it, just validate it, look at it and see, hey, wait a minute, what is this all about? Kind of talk about that anchor, look at the whole purpose of what's kind of going around and say, yeah, okay, give me a second here before we go any further than this. Help me to understand this context a little bit. Help me to get into this a little bit more deeply and a little bit more broadly, so that I can kind of see how this fits in the global picture. The key with once an anchor has been set, and even if it's a wrong anchor or an error, it becomes difficult for most people to let it go. Because they don't want to look foolish, right? They've made all of these decisions based upon that anchor that has been dropped. And if you suddenly move that anchor, that causes a lot of frustration, a lot of consternation, and I'm like, wait, what are you doing? What's going on? I made all these decisions and we were doing this and this is what was happening, right? Because they're very invested in it. There's a lot of things that have been chained to that anchor. So there's a lot of animosity and feelings that could come up with that. So addressing the anchor bias, you want to be able to raise that anchor, and you want to raise the anchor as soon as you can. You don't let it sit around. The longer a false or bad anchor is in place, the more links are made to it. So think about a team of 20 people. If there's a bad anchor that's been dropped, they have all 20 people have now chained into that anchor. And then you got a lot of chain you need to break there. And it becomes more and more difficult to do so, right? And it just becomes exponential unto itself. So it's something to be aware of when you first get that. But the good of this, there is a good in anchoring bias, right? If an anchor is set firmly, it's set correctly, and it's set in a good, form, it's going to help that team continue to make decisions and move forward. Because the beauty of the anchor is that if everybody is on to the same anchor, everybody's going to be chaining to that anchor. Everybody's going to be drawing their chain into that anchor, and they're just going to keep making decisions, and the anchor will be fully supported. One of the bad parts of this is sometimes that anchor should have been questioned and should have been moved. As an example, this was a project that I was working on, where the whole anchor was that we're going to put in a new system for telephonic responding for mental health. Great, sounds like a wonderful thing. But we dropped the anchor in that, well, it's got to be this. It's got to be this type of application. It has to be an application that performs these particular functions in a particular way, and they wanted everything to be on a standalone software application that was installed on laptops. Well, that was great, but they didn't take into consideration the fact of the turnover that was going on, and they didn't put it in holistically, right? Because when you're working from home, how do you update that application if it's installed on that PC, on that laptop, right? You get a lot of work that had to be done with that. And to update the database, who's eligible for this service, confirming identity, things along those lines, resources, hospitals, all that fun stuff. the physician's guide and reference guide, and all was pretty much in there. So it became a very bad thing happened because we plopped it down into this mentality of we got to do it in this particular way. And then suddenly it was like, well, that's not going to work because we're remote and we have limited bandwidth. And downloading, I forget how many, it was like a terabyte of data. It was incredible, the amount of data that had to be downloaded to a workstation. Well, as you can imagine, to downloading it, even in today's high-speed world, that's going to take a lot of time. And it was the reason why the project failed, is because a lot of the counselors and mental health advisors and doctors and nurses that were utilizing or trying to utilize that application couldn't get it updated. They couldn't get into it, and it didn't have the most recent resources, and the synchronization process would spin for a good 12 hours. So it didn't work out. And it's because we anchored ourselves in the wrong place. So it's good to look at that anchor and understand that sometimes that it does from time to time have to move. Another one here is the availability heuristic. We overvalue the limited amount of information that's presented to us. In this bias, what we're talking about is, and I'm notorious for this because I'm a red, and if you've ever taken the DISC assessment where you've got the different colors, reds were drivers, right? We want to keep moving and kind of doing our thing, and I also have a little bit of blue, and that's analytical side of things. I like to make keep things moving and shaking and making good decisions. But availability heuristic is, it's really based on your basic decisions on a limited data set. You're not out there looking at things more globally. You're not looking at the full context of the picture. And guilty as charged. I've done this multiple times where you kind of get on that roll going, right? And you just, oh yeah, this is what it is. This is what it is. And you don't start to think about things in a more broader perspective. But think about this in terms of society and some of the current issues that we're having. A person may argue that vaccines are not needed because they don't know anybody that got sick, right? Because there's no correlation there. We're trying to do this one thing, and well, I don't know anybody that's gets sick, so why do I need a vaccine? Even when even in the face of news reports and things telling folks, hey, this is a real disease, people have died from it, they still hold on to that belief because they have no direct information or observation that refutes it. They don't know anybody, right, that's died from COVID. And as more and more individuals died from COVID, it sort of spread, right? And it became more real because there were more people involved in it. It got bigger in context, right? People began to see the bigger context of the situation that was going on. So and this also happens in organizations that are insulated from their customers. This happened with a travel company that I had consulted with, and they believe that they understand what their customers are needing. They believe that they already know that. It's like, Paul, we know what our customers want. They've been our customers for years. Why do we need to go out and talk to our customers? We don't want to do that. And so they put up roadblocks and they said, nope, BAs cannot talk to customers, naughty. And I challenged that. I was like, but who is talking to customers, and who is the voice of the customer, and how do you know what they're talking about? What's their value? What's the thing that they're really looking to need? And I was like, oh, okay, well, we'll try this tiny little pilot, Paul, just to kind of pat me on the head. Nice little business analyst that I am. Okay, you can go talk to just a few, and you have to have the salesperson there, and don't say anything stupid. Okay, so off we went, and we had a little conversation with customers, and we began the conversation by, how are things going? Where are you in the product, and what are your thoughts, and that sort of thing. And it was sort of eye-opening to the folks because I gathered up all this information, and the sales guy was hearing this too, apparently for the first time because he was brand spanking new to the position. And was just like, oh, wait a minute, what's going on? These people are not happy. What we're not even addressing these concerns and needs that these people have in order to keep the business, right? And it just became very, very, very difficult for the customers to continue to do business, and they were losing customers. The customers were walking away. It's like, well, you don't listen to me. Why would I work with you? Why would I? I'm spending money here, and you're not listening. So what am I doing? Right? You go on to a different, vendor. And so we brought all of this back, right? And we brought it back to the board and said, well, okay, here's the feedback that we got. And there were some Zoom recordings that we had of some of these meetings, and we played the recordings. Said, this is exactly what your customers are saying about you, and here's what they have agreed to share. And it was sort of this like, boom, right? They hit the concrete wall. So availability heuristic comes into play with that, because if you think you've got the full set of information, you may not. So it's good to be a little bit pleasantly paranoid and say, well, do I need to look at this in a larger scope? Do I need to look at this from a bigger angle? And that's when you're addressing this bias, you need to look at information more globally. And you also need to have that empathy. That's a big part of this too. Walk in their shoes, understand what your customers are really going through. Is it maybe it's a Gemba, maybe it's a partnership or a conference or pilot, or I don't know, an internship or something like that, where you can sit down with them and just kind of go through in their world and see how it's going for them. See what's kind of irking them, what goes well, what doesn't go well, and kind of get the feeling of what it is that they're trying to do on a day-to-day basis. And so it's that empathy. It's really getting in there and walking in their shoes. You can certainly feel this in some organizations where they insulate you as an analyst. No, we don't want you to talk to those people. We only want you to talk to these people. In that situation, you kind of have to have the conversation about, hey, the reason why I want to talk to these people is because I want to understand this a little bit more globally. Understanding this a little bit more globally is going to help me to make sure that I've got the right stakeholders, I've got the right stakeholder analysis, and then I'm gathering up the right requirements, right? If we're missing stakeholders, or we're not addressing certain stakeholders because we're trying to do this and keep them as small as possible, we're going to miss some important stuff. We're going to miss important viewpoints that can help us significantly in our system and in our requirements, and getting a better solution requirements all put together. So we really want to be able to do that. The good about the availability is that sometimes you have to make a fast decision, and you're going to make that fast decision on a limited amount of data. It's just going to be like, well, this is as much data as I have up to this point. Here's the risk. I think I'm missing things over here and over here and over here. But if you were to demand an absolute decision at this immediate point, with the caveat of I'm missing these pieces, this is the decision that I would give. And it's just, it's a way of moving things forward, right? You want to be able to move forward quickly. Sometimes the analysis paralysis kicks in, right? If we did truly look at everything holistically and globally all over the place, would be very difficult to finish it, right? We got time constraints, right? Things got to get done in a very quick time. 2 weeks if you're in the agile sprints and all that good stuff. So just recognize that. Availability restrictions aren't bad, but know when you have to make it, when you are being pushed to make a decision, or you're pushed to do something, what the caveats of that are. That I know I'm missing this, and I may be missing things on over in here. So I'm going to give you this decision, but I'm going to caveat it by saying, listen, these things are not where they should be. The bad part of this is, if you don't understand that you have the availability heuristic bias, you just kind of snap off those decisions using the very limited knowledge that you have, and you're perfectly comfortable with it. And it can kind of get into the way of progression of the particular sprint or project or change within the organization, is because you're horse blinders, right? You're just too focused on this small amount of data, and you need to just kind of bring it up a little bit. In a data, what we called the data lake project that I was working on, what we did is we sort of used the availability heuristic to kind of take groups of data and make decisions based on groups of it, right? Because I mean, we had over 5 petabytes of data to go through. Right? That's a whole lot of data. And you couldn't possibly get it in your head, right? It was too big. So what we did is we busted it up into little groups, and we used the availability here to a good point is that, we started to make decisions based upon groups of data. We can make this decision because we understand this group, and we can make a decision because we understand this group. And so we grouped everything out. I think there was well over, 32 groups of data. And whenever we had to make a decision, we'd look at all 32 of those groups and go, yeah, this one and this one and this one tell us this. So you can use it to your advantage as well. The bandwagon effect. Yeah, this is a bias. It's the probability of one person adopt a belief that increases based on the number of people who hold that belief. This is something that a belief is adopted, whether it's wrong or right, correct or incorrect, and it's just based on the number of people that believe in it, right? I love this example because it kind of creates this echo chamber, and things kind of, like bloom and blossom into something much bigger and crazier. Members of the group begin to agree with it, even if they don't, understand exactly what it is that they're getting on to, right? They don't even know what the bandwagon is about, but they're going to jump on it anyway because everybody else is going through this. Yeah, and this is a great example of there's always some diet fad out there, right? There's always some, crazy thing that everybody has to do. And when everybody's talking, in this example, the keto diet, everybody's talking about it, you kind of feel like you're missing out on something. It's like, oh, well, I don't know. Look, everybody else seems to be really talking about positive about it and really like going crazy for it. And it becomes very popular. This is very true of the way people vote. If you want to look at it from the political perspective, is that they look at the polls. Their decision making is based entirely on a poll. Oh, he seems popular. Okay, great. That's the one I'll vote for. And so that comes into play, and a little bit of that, and that come to play in the corporate world as well. We all sort of get on the bandwagon. The trick with the bandwagon effect, especially when it comes to an organizational change, is to make sure that everybody understands that when what is it that we're changing, why we're changing it, and creating the bandwagon in a way that's meaningful, and that it's and giving them everything that they need to know to understand how that particular change will affect the organization. Bandwagons in and of themselves are not good or bad, but they can certainly be used in either way. I actually like the bandwagon effect if you are doing an organizational-wide change. Right? You're putting in a new ERP system, you're putting in a CRM system, a customer relationship management system, or any kind of system that's more organizational wide. You want to look at that from a perspective, okay, let me build the bandwagon. Let me put together, my little red wagon, if it's that, and get people on board with this, right? So that they're supporting, so that they're the champion, so that they're the exciter, and they're out there going, yay, pom-poms, and this is great, and cheerleading and all that fun stuff, because that's going to help me when I'm trying to put this change in and gather requirements from stakeholders. If the stakeholders are like, yay, let's do it, let's rock and roll, well, that's going to make my job a whole heck of a lot easier. And, it's pretty difficult to get requirements from a stakeholder who doesn't want to talk to you or doesn't want to engage, right? So it's a good thing. Bandwagons can be a good thing. They don't have to be bad. I know they can get in that negative connotation sometimes. I know that can be particularly true of in the United States. Our political system is, you're left or right and all that fun and exciting stuff. And, but what you want to do here is you want to be careful of the bandwagon. Make sure that you're not hopping on it without understanding it a little bit. There are many sides to things, and just kind of be aware of those sides, and just know that you have this ability to kind of go further, go deeper, and kind of take a look at things a little bit before you get that bandwagon going. To stop a bandwagon, the more people that are on it, the more difficult it is to stop that wagon. It's just heavy with people, right? There's just a lot of folks being involved in it. It's tricky. So one of the key little takeaways is that if you do see the bandwagon starting to happen, take a peek at it. Is that the bandwagon that we should be looking at? Is this the bandwagon that we should be constructing? Is it making the right sort of thing? So I love this bandwagon. I use this at IBM Global Services a lot. Is, you know, when you've got 320,000 employees worldwide and you're trying to convince them to make a change, forget about it, right? It's impossible. So creating the bandwagon was how I did that. It was sort of like I was marketing my own change. I was in security administration and operations, and it was my job pretty much to make sure that systems were all locked down and all that fun, exciting stuff. And whenever I made a change, the first time I got in there and I made a change and it went out and I, you know, did my due diligence and got the right requirements and solution and met all the good stuff. And then when it came time to get more requirements out of some of the stakeholders, the systems that we were doing security for, boy, was there a lot of craziness going on there. There was a lot of animosity, there was no trust, right? They were just wondering, why is this guy working on this project at all? Why do we have to do this? It seems minor and insignificant. So what I did in that situation is I sort of created an environment of energy where I invited all these stakeholders in and I said, you know what, I'm going to walk you through this and I want you to give me your input. Talk to me about this, you know, and this is stripes off at the door. If, you know, the highest paid person in the room isn't going to dominate the conversation. So if you're, you know, a VP or director, stripes off at the door, take your titles, leave them at the door. I want to focus with you on this particular solution. And there is no right or wrong. You know, and if I need to change, great, I'll change. That's the way it is. I will do that. I am not here to force a decision down. I'm here to help you create that. And so what we did is we created this bandwagon where all these stakeholders that were on the platforms that were going to change were like, I get it, I like it, let's do it. And they all agreed to that. And then when you started that got everybody on the same thing and everybody's rah, let's go. That sort of ripple affected out. It kind of moved out even further throughout the whole entire organization. So it, you know, slowly but surely, I mean, it would take a good 3 months to 4 months to get that bandwagon going around and getting everybody to jump on board for that big change and for that big solution. But it did work and it was very effective. And I used that multiple times. So bandwagon can be a good thing. It can totally be a good thing. The blind spot, this is an interesting one. The probability of one person adopting a belief increases based on the number of people who hold that belief. It's very similar to a bandwagon, but the bias is not understanding you might have a bias is kind of what it's saying. You are definitely under the influence of the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect says basically that we have a tendency to overestimate our abilities. We kind of think, let me look at that. Man, that's only going to take 5 hours. Piece of cake. I've done it. Yeah. And so we sort of overestimate our abilities, and in our estimating as well, we kind of sort of get that a little out of whack. And so where that comes into play is the blind spot comes into play is not understanding that you are under the influence of the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? And so you kind of are marching along and doing your thing, and you're getting your requirements, and oh, this is taking a lot more time than I expected, right? And things start to get a little slower and slower and slower and all that kind of stuff. And when we did the original estimating, we thought that we'd only have, 10 stakeholders. But as we dove into it and we got into the details, we went from 10 stakeholders to 30. And we, really expanded our stakeholders, right? And so it was, just kind of making it more difficult, right? 30, and then, I got 20 people that I never even planned And so that can create a pretty big blind spot sometimes. Usually it isn't quite that dramatic, right? There's a couple stakeholders that you miss here and there, is usually how that happens. Also, the blind spot is that you notice biases in others more often than you notice those biases in yourselves. That's also part of Dunning-Kruger as well. Is you're kind of, very aware of others, but you may not be necessarily aware of yourself. So this is kind of self-reflection, and looking at some of these decisions that you're making or activities that you're making, and kind of stepping back and going, am I doing the right thing here? Am I biased? Am I blinded in one spot or another? Kind of just looking at it a little bit. I mean, I know if in my career, I've definitely been hit the blind spot so many times I can't even tell you. And it's because I didn't really kind of look at the situation more thoroughly enough, especially when it came to like the simplest of things, and the blind spot can hit you, and it's very annoying. We had to move server racks from the dock to the server farm, which was in the sub basement. This is when I was working with IBM, and I thought, requirements, easy peasy, nothing to it, right? All I got to do is check this and check that, and all it was. Yeah, I had a blind spot there, and the blind spot is that I didn't go and check the elevator size of the elevator. So what had happened is that the server racks hit the deck on the receiving dock. Great, no problem. Arrived perfectly, all nice and neatly wrapped up. And they took that on a little happy little forklift into the elevator, and it didn't fit. It did not fit into it. Was too tall. And so we tried angling it and tipping it and doing all these crazy things. And it was the blind spot. I totally did not check the height requirement for that server rack. And there it was. There was the height requirement, right in front of my face it was actually posted in the elevator. An elevator I never used. So there was my blind spot. I was like, oh, I missed that requirement. And it was like on a piece of paper, and it was just terrible to kind of recover from that, because he had to unwrap everything and then disassemble the entire rack into thousands of pieces. I spent so much time on that with the project manager. It was crazy. And then reassemble it when you got downstairs. It was pretty bad. Took a whole heck of a lot longer to get that rack in there. So, it's just being aware of your blind spots, kind of just step back and go, hey, am I missing something? Am I missing something? And I like to ask the question, walk me through it. Let's walk through this. Walk me through this situation, right? Maybe it's a process. Maybe it's a journey from the receiving dock to the server farm. Maybe it's, a point A to point B kind of thing. Walk me through it. Just the whole kit and caboodle. Walk me through this. And I say that because that helps me to get away from blind spots a little bit, because as I go through the process, I start to look at it in the light of, well, what about this? Am I missing anything about that step in my requirements? Well, let's look at this. Yeah, I gotta, this thing has to be unlocked. Okay, all right, great. Oh, you have to enter a code here and hit this button, and then that'll open up this other thing for you. And then the screen will come back. Okay, that makes sense. Oh, wait a minute. What if there's the wrong code? Oh, it gives you an error message. Okay, great. What does that error message say again? Oh, okay, great. Yeah, that makes totally sense. And so you just kind of keep walking through the process, and 90% of the time, 90% of the time, you're going to be just like, yeah, okay, got it. But there's that 10%, maybe it's only even 5%, but it's that one teeny little blind spot that you just didn't quite think about when you were walking through the whole thing, that can cause a lot of pain. This is particularly true when I do extract, transform, load, which is a process of taking data from one system or source, transforming it into a format that the target can understand, and then loading it into the target system. There's a lot of stuff that can happen and go wrong on that whole thing. So there was a lot of me asking questions of like, well, just walk me through it. Walk me through this. I mean, literally, it was one data point at a time. Walk me through it. Okay, first name. So when the first name goes over here this is the source system, and we're going to bring it in here. Okay, what does the target system have? Oh, they've got F name. They don't have first name. Okay, so that it maps. We're good. Oh, they have it all in capital. It's all capitalized. Okay, so I'll have to transform this from first letter being capitalized to all letters being capitalized. Okay, so I write that down. And we kind of continue to walk through that whole transformation line by line by line by line by line. It's a workshop. It took forever. But you know what? There was a few points in there that I was pretty gall darn sure I knew what that data was. I knew what it was. And I didn't quite know what it was because things have changed a little bit since my last experience. So use that technique, walk me through it. Let's take a little walk. Let's walk me through and let's kind of do this whole thing. It works in data, it works in customer experience and all that good stuff. It works pretty well. With the blind spot, it's just good to be aware of your own biases and to understand that others have these biases too, and recognize that the biases in us, ourselves, and in others, and what they're kind of going through. Just being kind of aware of their logical and critical thinking. We are all biased. Every human being has a bias. You should not feel bad about that. You should not feel that you are subpar or less than. We as human beings have what's called a predictive modeling thought process. Basically what that means is that your brain is always trying to be 3 to 5 steps ahead of what's actually going on at this particular moment, right? It wants to be able to respond as quickly as possible, which makes us pretty successful as creatures, right? Because we don't even know that we're doing this. It's happening in our head. But that can sometimes get a little bit out of control, and we sort of don't recognize some of the biases that we have as individuals or in others. The bad is that, if you're not aware of that, it's going to really make it difficult. And other folks are going to kind of see that you're operating from a blind spot. You're missing some of the big points. And the trust level is going to kind of, it's going to go down a little bit, right? Because you're kind of missing some of the things. Humility is a good thing. If it's a mistake, it's a mistake. And, oh, I learned that. That's awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you for letting me learn that and letting me to see that piece of that, definitely. So the next one here is choice supportive. And once we make a decision, we feel we need to stick to it. Yeah, that's kind of how we especially when we take a lot of time and effort into having this decision, right? If I'm doing a lot of research and I am spending a month on research to make a decision, when I make that decision, even if it's a decision as a group or as an individual, either way, we're going to feel pretty gall darn firm in that, right? We're going to feel that it's a good decision, and then we're going to stick to it, right? Because we don't want to feel like, oh gosh, we did all of this work and it's not the right thing. That could totally happen, though. It can happen that you've done a month of research, and suddenly something new pops into the picture, and ka-chunk, that decision doesn't quite work anymore. It's just being open to the fact that of being adaptable, flexible in the decision-making process, and even in the solution process, right? You'll spend months designing a business solution. Something will have changed in the meantime. It's just being able to adapt and be flexible. Buying a car is a good example of this. I know several of my family members do this. They'll do their research and then they'll be very thorough about it. Look at all these different sources and tests and consumer reporting and feedback and all that great stuff. And then they'll buy the car. And then after they buy the car, they feel very positive about that decision, right? Because they've spent all that time doing that research. They're really hyped up on it. There's actually endorphins that have released in your brain that says, hey, pat on the shoulder, we're doing a good job. Absolutely. We're very happy about that thing. And because we have that very positive feeling about things, we have a tendency to latch onto it and not change that decision. Even when we have new negative information about the car, we'll dismiss it. We'll just be like, hey, I made the right decision. Boom, 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 and off we go. That's something to be careful of with choice supportive bias, is that you don't ignore data that's negative or information that's coming to you that says, well, wait a minute, this may not work the way you think it will. This business solution may not be the best approach. So you have to kind of come back a little bit and say, all right, well, do we have this bias, right? Are we latching onto our own decision, our own solution, and not letting go because, oh, nope, I own it. We did all this work. And you'll get that in meetings, right? And this happened to me when I was working on a manufacturing project, and we came up with a solution, right? And it was creating this packaging machine, and it was a machine that would package the product and put the wrap on it and box it up and all that good stuff. It was all automated. And we did all of this research. We spent a month doing research and prototyping and the whole 9 yards, right? We just went gangbusters on it. We got the decision that was made. And then we came back, and it was probably 3 weeks into starting the development and implementation of this. We're going to put it on the manufacturing floor, and all that good stuff. And then we noticed that something wasn't right. Something was missing when we don't know what it was. And we kind of went into it a little bit further. And we said, oh, we didn't quite hit this decision correctly. We kind of missed a few things here for whatever reason. And we need to kind of change our decision a little bit, right? So we went back to the executive committee, and it was pretty tense meeting, right? Like, how could you do this? You spent a month on this. How could you make this bad decision? This is terrible. You're an idiot. And it was pretty condescending meeting for me, basically, as they're kind of beating me up. And I was like, well, listen, all the information that we had up to that point had indicated that this was the right solution. And yes, we did spend a lot of time on research and prototyping. And it's a good thing that we did, because we understand our needs. We understand that what we really need. Now, we have this choice of a solution. We found out, hey, it's not the best solution. It may not work the way that we thought. And that's okay. We need to be a little bit more flexible and kind of get to that. And yeah, they like to throw around the term sunk costs, which is a bit of a fallacy in itself. But it was very hard to get folks away from that. I mean, they just felt that, that this was a total waste of time from A to Z. So to counter that, we did the research. Yes, we did our thing. It's a good thing that we did that. It's a great thing that we did the prototyping. We understand what this thing is all about. Now we have a greater appreciation for it, and we can even make even better decisions now because we've gone through this whole thing a little bit. So just be kind of aware of that. Choice supportive bias can kind of have that backlash a little bit. Keeping the good thing about choice supportive bias here is, keeping to the vision helps move things forward, right? Because you know that you made this decision, great, and okay, from time to time, you're just going to have to kind of look at it and go, okay, still good? All right, still good. Let's keep going. You've created, at that point, sort of an anchor, if you will. You're going back to that anchor bias a little bit in folks, because now folks have seen that this decision has been made. The solution is going to be resembling this particular format or what have you. And they're going to start linking into it, and it's going to start having good stuff going. It keeps that path clear. It really does keep it moving forward. That's the good part of choice supportive bias. The bad part about this is that it can sometimes create tunnel vision a little bit, that you don't look outside, right? You make a decision and then stop looking at it. And sometimes you may have to come back to that decision and reevaluate it based on some new data that you found. As this has happened to me multiple times where a new stakeholder has come into the picture, or a stakeholder has left the organization and then I got a new one, kind of swapping out stakeholders there a little bit, and they have different perspectives, and those different perspectives caused a little bit of change. Just remember progressive elaboration, if it can change, it will change. That's progressive elaboration in a nutshell. But basically, the more that you interact with something, the more you learn about it, and the more you are able to predict its future behavior, is kind of what's going on there. But you shouldn't be afraid to review a decision. And you're going to get kind of pushback for that a little bit, and that's okay. But you should be able to just kind of, verify, validate that we're making the right things. This is especially true when you're looking at requirements traceability, where you're tracing requirements from the project charter over here all the way through your business and stakeholder and into functional and into testing and all that good stuff. Things can get a little wonky at that point. And you just want to be able to know that if things do get a little bit wonky, that they are actually getting there, right? And traceability is a really important part of requirements, in that you want to make sure that all of the requirements that you have trace back to the business solution. I've certainly am guilty of that, of not doing that traceability. Naughty Paul, it's true, I've done it. And I got into a little bit of crazy trouble with it because I was missing pieces of it and I didn't get the full solution designed. I only designed a majority of it, not the complete picture that I should have. So those are things to kind of keep in mind with that piece of it. I do love this one. This is the clustering illusion. After a sequence of unrelated random events, we try to find patterns in it. The roulette table in Las Vegas is a classic example of this one. It comes up red multiple times, and we begin to think that there's a pattern there. Is there a pattern on a roulette wheel? No, it's all random. There's no clustering there. It's all random. That's just kind of the way it is. And we try to create a meaning by clustering it, but the meaning really isn't there. They really are random events away from each other. Where clustering comes into play is when you're looking at information and data and you're trying to understand if there is a pattern and if that pattern is a real pattern. This is where artificial intelligence gets into trouble. Artificial intelligence is a great tool for creating patterns because it can certainly recognize those patterns. But where AI falls flat is it doesn't have the intelligence to know whether or not that is a valid grouping of data or if it's just randomized data that just happens to look that way, especially in the case of a roulette wheel on there. It's also true in data a lot, and also in other areas as well. You'll see the clustering illusion where if you make a change, anything that goes wrong after you make a change, they kind of tag it on you, right? It must be you because you were the last one to make a change. So therefore, you're the... No, not quite so much. That's this clustering illusion. Even events can be random, but they don't have to be related, is what the deal is. So when you kind of be aware of this bias in that you're not trying to make these clusters, these groups of things, and in real life they're just random things that are happening, and we're trying to cluster them together and create meaning, and we can't. So business intelligence, this is notorious for that. Is that they'll see a pattern and then they'll think that's it, that's the pattern, this is how we know XYZ, and then after a while the data sort of kind of falls apart. And it was that way when you looked at the data in one moment in time, but as time went on you could start to see that it was just random. There was no pattern there at all. And we do like to do this. People like to create the, the snap decision that, boom, that is. So for this, what I like, the advice that I give to folks is like, great, if you want to cluster this data and to make a decision or put it on a dashboard or look at it for some reason or build a requirement from data, you want to make sure that that grouping of data is good. So look at it from a perspective of, here's a week of data. Does the cluster still stand? Here's another week of data. Does the cluster still stand? Does this grouping of data still make sense? Are we still focusing on the same areas that we need to be? And just kind of driving it through that particular thing. The good about this is that we as human beings also, this is part of our little brains going crazy here. They want to see the pattern. They want to see the pattern and they want to be reactive to it and they want to make decisions on it. That's great. Having the ability to see patterns and create them and make them valid, wonderful, because it helps you get through large amounts of data quickly. You can move through that more quickly. But we just have to be careful about that cluster, right? Is it really a cluster? Is it really a group? Is it really something that is going to stick to it, right? Stick to the bones, if you will, and kind of look at that. So make sure that you have a large enough data set. Make sure you're looking a little bit more higher in context, and then look at that data in terms of here's a day, here's a week, here's a month, here's a couple months, and just kind of look at that time frame a little bit more and see that where they kind of clump together in different perspectives. You'll notice that what you thought was a pattern may wind up being not a pattern at all, or you may discover that as you started to move this into different time frames, you'll notice that there really is a cluster, but it's a different cluster than you originally thought, right? Because you weren't kind of divvying it down. Look to see if they're meaningful, and what's the best way to do that. We're going to wrap it up here real quick here. Confirmation bias is that we tend to listen to only the data or information that relates to our own preconceptions, and we sort of miss things a little bit. I think, this is, as analysts, I think we're pretty well aware of this ourselves. I think we as BAs know that we have to listen broadly. We have to look at things, how they fit with an organization, because we're change agents, right? We're change agents. We make change happen. We know what we understand the needs. We understand the stakeholders. We understand the business solution. We make change happen. That's what we do. That's our passion. That's our power. And we've got a lot of it. And we just have to be careful, right? That we don't listen to just a small set of data, that we look and try and get the global holistics of things. So one of the things about confirmation bias is to just try and instead of saying, is this correct, say, how can I prove it wrong? Instead of focusing on how to prove it right, focus on how do you prove it wrong? How can you debunk it? And it's changing that mindset a little bit. So it's changing the way that you think. And it's a way to kind of make sure that you don't have that confirmation bias, right? And you also want to make sure that, looking globally, kind of checking it, turning it on its side, turning it upside down even, and looking at it from the different angles. And work toward this open inquiry. And I think we as VAs do this naturally. I don't think there's anything magical about us. That's magical about us, because a lot of other folks out there don't necessarily have that type of thinking and sort of go there. So you might want to recognize this in others, right? That they're not looking at all of the data. They're not looking at the big picture. And so you want to get into the little stakeholders' mind and just want to kind of open it up, make it a little bit more broader for them so that they can see the whole picture. I did that with a stakeholder of mine that, she was very much focused just on her team, and that was it. She didn't understand what the other teams were. So as information was passing through her team, she really wasn't looking at the data that was the input and the data that was the output and who was consuming it, right? So we did a SIPOC and we said, well, okay, Sue, here's what happens. You're getting data in from this place. This is the way it is. And okay, you've got some concerns there because that data is kind of crap. So we need to fix that up, right? Okay, now you're passing data onto this next team, three other teams. and here's their needs. And we looked at those and we figured it out. And it was that understanding of, hey, your team is actually impacting 3 other teams. 2 of the teams she wasn't even aware of. She goes, I had no idea that my data was being consumed by those folks. No clue. She had no idea. And it was a surprise. So that was one of the things too with this confirmation bias. You can help people expand, look at things in a more global and holistic point of view. Definitely, the bad about this is small sets of information. Try and open folks up. Try and avoid them. Try and make sure that they haven't laid that anchor down, and that they're willing to look at things in a little bit larger picture. Historical bias is also another one where you place great value upon those things that happened previously. This is my experience, and all of my decisions come from my experience, is kind of how this works. And so what happens is that things that are currently happening, things that are currently changing, don't necessarily fit into those historical patterns. And so they're just refusing to believe that has been that. Is that it is happening that way, right? Is that, well, wait a minute, this never happened in the past, right? So why would it be happening now? Okay, well, you gotta bring them into the current world. You have to demonstrate to them that there is a better approach to this, and there's a better approach to looking at it from a different perspective, and being open and presenting that newly advanced type of thing. I love this, how to prove the earth is round. That was, for a long time, people thought the earth was flat, hundreds, probably 1,000 years or more. But science came along and said, yeah, no, it's round, right? And even today, there's the Flat Earth Society, who's totally convinced that the Earth is flat, although most of the 99% of the world knows that it is round. We have satellites and things which can easily prove that. But here's the cute little exercise to demonstrate that from WikiHow. It's just being open, right? Historical bias is good if you have somebody that has a long, deep interaction with the system, right? That is invaluable experience. Of course it is. That is a very good thing to have. They understand the mistakes from the past. And it also is good in that it prevents the Groundhog Day thing, where you keep making the same mistake over and over and over and over and over, expecting a different result, and you never get that same result. And so it kind of helps you to avoid some of those errors. That's the good part of historical bias. The bad is if you're living in the past, you're not looking at the future, and then you're not paying attention to what really needs to happen. So kind of be a bit of a detriment at that point. So always look at that. We do have the pro-innovation bias. This is overvaluing the usefulness of a new product or change. Guys, we've been there, right? This happened to me so many times. The director, the executive went to a trade show, found this fabulous new piece of software. Wow, this is so great. This change will make it awesome. This new piece of technology is going to rule the world. Okay, the latest pro-innovation bias, I would have to say, is artificial intelligence, AI. No, AI is not going to replace a BA. Nice try. AI does not have empathy. It doesn't understand human behavior. It can't read between the lines. It's good at creating and finding patterns. But of course, that's the clustering bias. An AI can find a pattern, absolutely, but it has no way of evaluating if that pattern is in fact valid. It could just be random. So with pro-innovation bias, you got to really create that empathy, right, with your stakeholders, and kind of understand what their needs are, and really get into, hey, let's not pick the solution. Let's understand the needs first. And that's what you're doing. When you do that, when you focus on what are our needs first before we focus on the solution, that is helping to prevent this pro-innovation bias. Anytime that you come to the table with a solution in mind, without knowing what all of the requirements are for those stakeholders and other folks in the organization, that's pro-innovation bias. And you want to break that cycle. You want to make sure that you get all of that in there. It's good to know, though, pro-innovation is not a bad thing. I'm a big supporter of change and innovation. Absolutely. I've got a green belt for heaven's sakes. I do think innovation is critical to the success of any organization. but in the right context, right? I think it's very important to understand the new tools and the new technologies and the new capabilities that are out there. Doesn't mean I have to implement them. It just means that I understand it. There could be pieces and parts of it that I can utilize as a part of my role here. This is very true with Agile, right? Agile at one point was very innovative. It's probably a little bit still in that category. But there was a lot of bias to it. It was just like, yeah, we're just going to do it. It's going to work fabulous. It's going to be perfect. But then we started to say, well, wait a minute, we could tweak it a little bit. We can make it work a little bit different for our organization. Maybe get a little bit more practical, pragmatic approach to bringing this methodology into our organization. And that's where you can create a way of harnessing pro-innovation bias, is saying, yep, it's new, it's great, let's look at it, and let's see how it would fit, right? Let's check this out and kind of see if there's there. And we do that by saying, well, here's the capabilities that this new innovation is going to give us. Here's the limits. Here's the bad stuff. And we just compare the good stuff to the bad stuff. And we look, okay, well, yes, if we put this in place, look at all the fabulous things that we can do now. Bell, whistle, bing, 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 yay for us. But then there's the bad stuff that comes along with it. And here's the limitations. This wouldn't work with our particular CRM system, where we have connection issues or integration issues, etc. So there's a great way to look at it from that pro perspective. This is my favorite. It's this salience bias, is that focusing on the most recognizable features of a situation and then ignoring those features that don't grab your attention, right? So basically, the bright, shiny thing is what you're focused on, but the rest of it, you're not. It's the tendency to focus on the most recognizable things in a systems, even those systems that don't kind of grab our attention, right? We kind of ignore them a little bit. It generally combines itself with a pro-innovation bias very nicely, into a complete disaster. Nicely into a complete disaster is what that's all about. Here's an example. You see a few articles about shark attacks that happened at the beach that you're staying at. And although your likelihood of being attacked by a shark has not changed, that's still very much there. You still feel unsafe in the water, and you're not likely to engage in the water. In reality, you're safer in that water than you are more likely to be killed in a space accident. This is true. A space accident than to be mauled by a shark. Wow, killed in a space accident. That's crazy. I don't know what that would entail. I assume that you'd have to be on some rocket launching into orbit. As I am not an astronaut, I feel pretty confident that I'm not going to encounter this particular thing. Hopefully, that's what they're referring to. Also, the shark side of it, there was 5 people that were killed last year in 2022. So five people were killed by sharks in all of 2022. And there were more space accidents where people were killed. Interesting. I'm still looking into who those people were and what those accidents were, because I'm like, oh, wait a minute, what? Wait, am I going to be in a space accident? What's happening? So there's a lot of great things. This also happens with violent crime. You read reports about violent crime happening, and then you suddenly begin to feel unsafe in your own neighborhood, even though your own neighborhood really hasn't done anything. For salience, it's best to step back and look at the bigger picture again. I know I said that kind of like my broken record, and that certainly does help on a lot of these biases. Evaluate the current situation, not just on the current limited information. Look back on things. One story won't give you the whole picture. Talk to experts, talk to other folks around that have that. So that is the end of the presentation. That's the end of the biases right there. Ran a little bit over time. I do apologize for that. We do have our happy little boot camps here with the tool. I encourage you to take a peek at that. This is our online store. This supports the Uncommon Foundation. That is a foundation that is supporting women, minority women, and immigrants here to the United States into getting a technology job. into business analysis. Believe it or not, yes, we this is what we're doing. We're working with a lot of minority women and folks that have just recently immigrated to the United States. They're looking for those jobs, and they have a knack for business analysis. They've got analysis in their blood. Well, yeah, let's give them the opportunity. So we do provide them with training and an opportunity to better understand analysis techniques and all that fun stuff. And we also teach them how to code. There's a little Microsoft connection there. Microsoft supports part of that. And so folks get Microsoft tools to learn how the DevOps type stuff to help program and all that good stuff. So maybe a little snappy shot of that little QR code there to help us support that, and all the sales of our little happy t-shirts and coffee mugs and all that good stuff on the site do help toward that cause. We do also support Ordway Center for the Performing Arts. We have elementary school students bused into seeing Broadway shows, right? And really understanding that. And we also have them doing some of the analysis activities that we provide to classrooms as well. A lot of great stuff that we're doing there. Here's my little happy mug, which you've already seen it on with. This is where you can get a hold of me. That'll be on the end of the presentation as well. That's it. We are all set. We do have a few minutes here for some question and answers. So I'm just going to close this down, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen here a little bit, and I'll take a peek at the chat. Do we have any questions? Oh, we do have a question. Please elaborate more on the sunk cost being a fallacy in itself. The fallacy with that, and it is called the sunk fallacy, is that because we believe that because we've invested so much into it that we just have to keep going. I've seen this happen in a lot of projects where it's, forgive the expression, it's kind of bad, but it's the death march, right? We all know that the project isn't working. We all know that there's something wrong, but we're not willing to look at what's wrong, and we just want to keep moving forward, right? We're just going to keep marching, no matter what's going on there. And what that does is it degrades the team considerably. The solution never goes in. Even if it does go in, it's probably not going to be the best solution there. We believe that because we've invested so much of our time and money that we should just keep going, no matter what. And it is brave, courageous to stand up and say, hey, wait, hold on one second here. This doesn't look like it's going well. We're missing something here. Do we need to have a conversation about changing direction, or do we need to have a conversation about flat out canceling the project? So that's kind of it's all based on money, is where that sunk cost comes into play. We've invested money, we've invested this time and money. We have to go forward. We have to implement it, instead of saying, well, wait a minute, is this solution the right solution that we should be looking at?
Hey, thank you. Paul, are there any more questions? No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So much of that resonated with me. I think a lot of us have had some of those similar experiences as you've described. So thank you again very much. I just have one ask for those of you who are willing. Would you please turn your cameras on, because we'd like to get a photo, a snapshot. So. Okay, let's see some of your faces. Okay, anyone else? Darren, I think you were gonna take the shot. Can you just let us know when you're good to go?
Yeah, it's good. Thanks.
Please.
Yeah.
Okay.
All good. Thank you very
Good.
much. Great.
Okay. All right. We'll let you all go. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you.